Top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that Niagara Falls' own unbeaten up-and-comer, Makia Kreps, will be returning to action later on this month on the 21st against an opponent that has yet to be announced. Makia Kreps is a skilled young fighter, an unbeaten one from right here in the US of A, that campaigns anywhere in between 118 and 126 pounds.
It's about 3 weight classes, 3 divisions, 118, 122, and 126. Her next fight is scheduled as a featherweight bout, 126 pounds.
Sporting a professional record of 5 wins with no losses, no draws, 2 recorded knockouts. Any division that Makia so decides to campaign in is that much deeper for it. And the women's featherweight division, especially right now, is a particularly deep weight class. That's where Amanda Serrano currently reigns as that division's undisputed champion. She's going to be having a rematch with Heather Hardy very soon.
On the undercard of Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz, I do think that Makia Kreps, Makia herself, is a ways out from challenging for an alphabet title at any of those weights, 118, 122, and 126, though she has the ability to one day become a champion.
You know, her very last fight, took place at 118 pounds at the Edison Ballroom in Manhattan, New York. That was against the very lively India Smith, a victory that has aged well for Makia Kreps. I say it all the time. There's more to boxing than what you see on paper. India Smith is a prime example of that. While she does have a good number of losses, she's a handful. She very recently dished out a loss to Sulem Urbina, gave former champion Miyo Yoshida all she could handle not but a week or so ago.
Miyo was very lucky to win a points decision.
It looked to me like India Smith was giving her a lot of problems. The same India Smith that Makia Kreps beat in November of last year when she was last in action. This is going to be her first fight of this year.
Featherweight bout scheduled for 8 rounds.
In what is a Lee Baxter promotion. Lee Baxter, that's a Canadian-based promotional outfit that does have a content deal with DAZN.
We talked about that. We talked about how very recently Lee Baxter made the decision to sign Australia's own Taylor Robertson.
They've got an arrangement. I'm not completely sure if Makia has the same kind of arrangement that Taylor Robertson has, but what we do know is she's set to be fighting on a Lee Baxter show later on this month. Makia Kreps, who exhibits great shot selection, great range control.
Comes from a fighting family. I recall hearing that Makia's mother was a pugilist as well. It's a family business.
Makia herself seems to be following in her mom's footsteps. She's racked up some impressive victories. Impressive for a fighter with just 5 professional fights. She beat India Smith, who I mentioned earlier. She beat unbeaten up-and-comer from Puerto Rico, Carmarie Vargas. Took on Carmarie in October of last year and capped off the year with the win over India Smith, who can be a handful.
Fighting out of a shell guard, Makia can be described as a bit of a slickster mover.
Fight going forwards, fight going backwards. Good range control.
Good legs.
Good shot selection. Makia punches. She does some good punch picking.
Variety is important. You want to keep the opponent guessing. Monotonous combinations can be timed, can be countered.
Whereas Makia shows good variety. Good punches mid-range to inside.
We don't yet know who she's going to be fighting.
The bout itself is registered on BoxRec as a featherweight bout, 2 divisions north of where she last fought at bantamweight, 118 pounds.
118 pounds, that's where Ebony Bridges reigns as that division's IBF champion. Mexico's own Yuli Hangluna, she's got the WBC. Denmark's Tina Thorsland, she's got the WBO.
United Kingdom's own Nina Hughes, she's got the WBA. That's the way the cookie crumbles at 118 pounds at 122.
You've got New Zealand's own Shernika Johnson holding the IBF title. Mexico's own Yamileth Mercado, she's got the WBC. France's own Sigaline Lafarve, she's got the WBO.
And Venezuela's own Mayerlin Rivas, she's got the WBA.
It's a super bantamweight. That's at 122 pounds. At 126, it's a lot more simple. There's only one champion at featherweight. There's only one champion at 126, and that's Amanda Serrano.
Makia Kreps campaigning anywhere in between 118 and 126 pounds. You can see how there are many paths to a title, many opportunities to be capitalized on, depending on what opportunities become available.
It's basically 9 champions in between those 3 weight classes.
So long as Makia keeps busy and keeps winning, gets herself in position, I think she's got the ceiling to see herself become not just a champion, but a multi-weight champion. She's the goods.
She's a good fucking fighter.
I can only assume that as the fight date approaches, we'll find out who exactly she's going to be sharing the ring with. Is anywhere in between 118 and 126 pounds. That's a lot of girls.
Makia is returning to action. Look for the ring return of Makia Kreps later on this month on the 21st.
Men's super middleweight news, Eddie Hearn says big fights await John Ryder after defeat to Canelo. Mentions Golovkin as a possibility. We know that Golovkin very recently chucked his two remaining alphabet titles in the men's middleweight division, the IBF and the WBA. Now, Erislandy Lara, his then mandatory challenger, has been elevated to full champion, and Esquiva Falcao of Brazil.
He's supposed to be fighting for the IBF.
I think his stock rises in defeat, Hearn said of Ryder in an interview with IFL TV. He was well beaten, but he was competitive, especially in the back end of the fight. Gennady Golovkin could be a possible high-profile name for Ryder in the future, Hearn said. You've got other fights coming up now. There are a lot of vacant titles being up for grabs at middleweight. John's name now and his profile has risen in America. He can land a big fight against the big-name American, WBC middleweight champion Jermall Charlo.
That doesn't happen.
Why even bring him up? Former two-division champion and current 168-pound contender Demetrius Andrade, still unbeaten. I know he's looking for fights, so who knows?
We know that Demetrius Andrade's last fight was on the undercard of Gervonta Davis versus Hector Garcia.
For a journeyman in Desmond Nicholson. And the idea behind going over there was it would bring him closer to a Charlo fight or a Benavidez fight,
But I'm hearing Benavidez is fighting Morrell.
Jermall Charlo still doesn't have a fight date. Not that I expect him to fight Demetrius in his very next fight. No way. This guy hasn't fought in 2 years.
Charlo hasn't.
So maybe Demetrius' recent stint at PBC will be short-lived and maybe he'll go back to Matchroom. When you go 12 rounds with Canelo Alvarez, there will always be some people that want to fight John Ryder to see if they can stop him to make a statement against Canelo. We're not looking to be anyone's statement, but if John wants to continue at this level, there will be a lot of opportunities for him.
Eddie mentioned Jermall Charlo, which isn't the least bit realistic. He also mentioned Gennady Golovkin, but who knows if Gennady Golovkin is ever going to come back.
Him chucking those two alphabet titles in the air isn't the most encouraging omen for an extended career for the former champion.
Demetrius Andrade seems a little bit more realistic to me.
He should be proud of that performance and realize that he's a world-class fighter, Hearn added. There's some big fights out there for him. Obviously, it was a tough defeat, and he took some punishment tonight, but he'll be back.
I think he endeared himself to the fans. I think Eddie Hearn hit the nail on the head. His stock went up.
Even though he lost, and he lost a lopsided fight, his stock went up because he wouldn't quit.
He wouldn't give up.
No matter how many times Canelo rocked him, socked him, dropped him, he wouldn't give in, he wouldn't give up.
It is possible, depending on how you perform, that your stock go up, even in defeat. Not dissimilar from what we saw in the Golovkin versus Jacobs fight. Even though Danny Jacobs lost.
He lost in good fashion. He lost in such a way that after the fight, that only added to his marquee value. His stock, in effect, went up.
I think the same applies to John Ryder. John Ryder, who said he thinks Canelo Alvarez is in decline.
To which Canelo Alvarez himself replied, for Ryder, it's a win just to not get knocked out, right? I respect the fight that he did, Alvarez said during his post-fight press conference. But look, we need to give Ryder his credit. He came to fight. His preparation was very good, and I respect the fight that he did.
Eddie Hearn seems to have big plans for John moving forward, but the fight that he fought, the punishment that he took, could leave him altered moving forward. John Ryder
got his nose busted in the first 2 or 3 rounds, got dropped 2 times, took a lot of right hands, took a lot of hard shots, the kind of shots that they could take something out of you well after the fight is over. So while John really endeared himself to the fans by not quitting and not giving up and hanging in there, how much of John is left?
How much more is left of that guy to put in a big fight?
34-year-old Ryder's conditioning nevertheless served him well. He threw only 2 fewer punches overall than Alvarez, 459 to 457, despite the fact that Ryder couldn't breathe through his nose for most of their bout. The resilient Ryder also effectively smothered Alvarez at times in a tiny ring that didn't afford them much room to operate at a sold-out Akron Stadium in Zapopan, Mexico, just outside of Alvarez's hometown of Guadalajara. He's strong, Alvarez said. He did everything in the ring, and that's what I expect because I saw him fighting with other guys, and he's tough.
This is a fight that people are overanalyzing, in my opinion.
They are, because whenever Canelo Alvarez sets foot in the ring, they expect flame to shoot out of his nose and sparks to shoot out of his ass.
Want the guy to piss lightning.
Did you hear what John Ryder said after the fight? For the first time in his entire boxing career, his nose was broken, his nose was busted. Canelo Alvarez did that. Looked like a 10-2 to 11-1 fight to me. It's a fight that never got away from Canelo.
Credit to John Ryder for hanging in there, but it was a lopsided affair.
So because Canelo Alvarez didn't stop John Ryder like many expected him to, some are saying this heralds the decline of Canelo Alvarez.
It's funny the way they treat this guy.
Canelo Alvarez stopped Caleb Plant in late 2021, and David Benavidez, he didn't stop Caleb Plant in 2023, over a year later.
He didn't stop him.
And even though he didn't stop him, the same people that are belittling and berating Canelo Alvarez for failing to stop John Ryder were praising David Benavidez.
Even though he didn't stop Caleb Plant the same way that Canelo stopped Caleb Plant.
The beating Canelo put on John Ryder was in fact worse than the beating that David Benavidez put on Caleb Plant.
It was worse.
From where I'm sitting, it was. And in spite of this, they're using the fact that Canelo didn't stop John as a sign that Canelo is slipping.
I think that's just a lot of wishful thinking.
I think whenever Canelo Alvarez is involved, they fire up the double standards that only apply to Canelo that don't apply to anybody else.
That's what I think.
John Ryder was always a hard-nosed bastard, a tough guy and a tough out for almost any super middleweight out there.
I knew that before this weekend's fight.
Canelo Alvarez beat the crap out of this guy. The only thing he didn't do was knock him out, but maybe that's because John is that tough.
Did you ever think of that?
And finally, addressing Matchroom's recent acquisition of both standout amateur and Olympic gold medalist Andy Cruz and two-time super lightweight champion Regis Prograis.
We talked about the Regis Prograis side of things, but the recent acquisition of Andy Cruz, I think that took a lot of people by surprise.
I myself was expecting Andy to go to the top rank side of things, where most standout amateurs go.
Top Rank seems to have the inside track on amateur standouts from all parts of the world.
But on Saturday night at Akron Stadium in Mexico, promoter Eddie Hearn of Matchroom revealed his two big signings. Hearn's company inked WBC junior welterweight champion Regis Prograis, and he will make the first defense of his title against Liam Paro on home soil at the Smoothie King Center in New Orleans, Louisiana, on Saturday, June 17th, live worldwide
On the zone.
Said it many times here on the channel that Matchroom has a proliferation of talent in the men's super lightweight division, and it behooves them to get a champion on their side of things, preferably Regis Prograis. And I don't know if someone was listening.
They've got the right idea.
Though it's the signing of Andy Cruz that really threw me for a loop. I wasn't expecting that. Additionally, it was announced that Cuban amateur sensation Andy Cruz signed a promotional agreement with Hearn's company. Many will recall that Keyshawn Davis, who's now on the top rank side of things and one of my favorite unbeaten up-and-comers, he actually started out with Matchroom, but some time passed and he decided that Top Rank would be a better fit for him.
As luck would have it, it seems that Matchroom has done one better and signed the man that beat Keyshawn Davis.
Andy Cruz. Cruz captured gold at the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo in the lightweight division with a win against Keyshawn Davis in the delayed games in August of 2021. Cruz also won numerous top-level amateur competitions over the last few years with several amateur titles and gold medals. We already knew that Andy Cruz had defected.
We already knew for some months that Andy had defected from his native Cuba, and it was his intention to sign to a big-time promotional outfit, but most expected that it would be Top Rank, not Matchroom.
You wonder that Andy's countryman, Guillermo Rigondeaux, might have had something to do with Andy's decision to go with Matchroom instead of Top Rank.
Guillermo Rigondeaux is one of the most decorated amateur boxers that ever boxed, a double Olympic gold medalist, and there are people out there that feel that Top Rank could have done more for that fighter.
People at Top Rank almost resented Guillermo Rigondeaux for his signature win over Nonito Donaire. You wonder that Andy Cruz didn't have that in mind when he made his decision? Both boxers were ringside to watch Mexican superstar Saul Canelo Alvarez, both Andy Cruz and Regis Prograis,
Not Rigo.
retain his undisputed super middleweight crown with a dominant 12-round unanimous decision win against John Ryder.
Now we have to find out if Andy Cruz can hack it in the pros.
Or is he one of these amateur standouts that has very much mastered the art of winning a 3-round fight, but not so much a 12-round fight? That has yet to be determined. Not every standout amateur makes for a great pro.
Might have to curb our enthusiasm, and let's see what Andy can do.
If he can be in the pros, who he has been in the amateurs, Matchroom,
They'll definitely have a major stake in today's lightweight division and potentially the super lightweight division. But that's not all, folks. Matchroom has been on a signing spree.
we know they signed Regis Prograis and Andy Cruz, Edgar Berlanga, and now they're looking at Subriel Matias, the super lightweight division's IBF champion. Matchroom Matchroom officials visited the champ in Puerto Rico last week, sources tell ESPN, to begin talks. Matias could join a 140-pound stable that includes Prograis, Jack Catterall, Dalton Smith,
Stevie Sparks, Montana Love, Hitchardson Richens.
Liam Buttle. I gotta tell you the truth.
What?
Subriel Matias needs to sign to Matchroom. Here's why. Very soon, Rolly Romero is going to be challenging for the WBA title over there on the PBC side of things, where Subriel has been fighting. And don't think for a second that should Rolly win, he's gonna go unify with Subriel. All Rolly's gonna do is use that title to try to get another Gervonta Davis fight. Gervonta Davis himself, he's not gonna give Subriel the time of day either.
No, he'd sooner have a rematch with Rolly.
Or a rematch with Isaac. Matchroom can keep Subriel Matias busy, en route to a major fight, a big fight, a unification match with Regis Prograis, who Subriel claims to want.
Here's your chance.
I knew about these rumors. I knew about Matchroom potentially signing Regis and signing Subriel Matias. I knew about those rumors, and I talked about them here on the channel last week, and when you think about it,
I didn't hear anything about anybody at Showtime or anybody at the PBC making a play to do Prograis versus Matias. I didn't hear anything about anybody bringing that fight over there to their side of things. So if they didn't want to do it, let Matchroom.
let them pay for it. They can afford to. They've got the fight dates. They've got the money. Subriel Matias, for a while now, has claimed that he wants a Regis Prograis fight. Well, now you know where Regis fights, and it's not like the people at the PBC have a better alternative. They don't. You're not going to get a Rolly fight,
No.
and you're not going to get a Davis fight.
No.
It's a pipe dream. Subriel Matias' handlers would be wasting their own time and their fighters waiting for those fights to roll around. Subriel is a entertaining fighter and a capable fighter, a champion.
But he doesn't have a profile, and because he doesn't have a profile, neither Rolly or Gervonta are going to want to fight him.
The acquisition of Subriel Matias would be perfect for the undercard of Edgar Berlanga's upcoming fight in the tri-state area in New York.
Some more Puerto Ricans on there.
In case Edgar stinks out the place like he stunk out the place before, you've got Subriel Matias. That guy's made for TV.
The ball is in Subriel's court. If he really wants a Prograis unification match, he knows what to do. He knows where to find Regis.
But if he's more comfortable barking from behind the fence,
Stay on the PBC side of things. Hope for the best.
if they can even afford to keep him active, there's a growing number of fighters on PBC Island that are on the shelf and have been on the shelf.
Subriel could be the next if he's not careful.
He needs to go to Matchroom. He needs to.